Hi everyone, welcome today. My name is Jen Barba and I'm a part of the MIT Sloan admissions team. I am excited to be with you today to review the application process for our MBA program here at the MIT Sloan School. I'm also joined by several of my colleagues. Alexis Marcus, Patricia Chen, and Ann Connors are all behind the scenes and on screen here to help answer questions and share some application tips and support you throughout the hour. So to kick things off, I wanted to just give an overview of the mission of the MIT Sloan School of Management, which of course is to develop principled, innovative leaders who improve the world and generate ideas that advance management practice. You know, now more than ever, this is so important to what we do and how we deliver the experience of what is the MBA experience at MIT Sloan. And then, you know, the first question we always receive is, what's the latest going on at MIT with regard to the pandemic? So, you know, at MIT Sloan, we are back on campus this fall. We are teaching courses to all of our graduate students within the Sloan community in 3 different ways. And it's up to the student to determine the way that best matches their specific unique needs. So there are courses being taught in a hybrid format. There are courses that are being taught fully in person. And then there are also, all the courses are also being taught virtually at the same time. So it's up to the individual student to determine what's best for them. But anyone who is able to make it to Cambridge and join us on campus this fall is able to do so. And there's lots of protocols that we've put in place to ensure safety and you know, protect the members of our community. You can see here on this slide is a demonstration of what we call the 4 W's. They're all over campus and throughout lots of different materials that are being distributed. In addition to that, students are being tested twice a week. You know, there's lots of, you know, regulations to help ensure safety of the community. And so, you know, next, I thought I'd share an update on where we are with the MBA class of 2022, who started just a couple weeks ago. So you'll see here the MBA class size increased a little bit, you know, throughout the late spring and summer months with all the uncertainty. We wanted to make sure we could deliver, you know, a diverse class and continue to maintain the strength that you're, you know, that you're used to seeing represented within the MIT Sloan MBA class. So here is just sort of a profile of the students who came in. The average years of experience is about 5 years of experience prior to joining the MBA class. Average age is 28, you know, a 3.46 undergraduate GPA, and that's out of the students who had a GPA on a 4.0 scale. Average GMAT was 722. Citizenship, about 34% international students, but that doesn't take into account US permanent residents. So when you take that into account, it's a little bit more like 40-60. We have 39% women, and then as you see, we have lots of different undergraduate degree studies represented. So there's no one particular path that a student needs to be on prior to coming to the MBA program. You know, we're looking for a diverse set of experiences. Really what's important to us is that whatever you've been doing it well, and we can see evidence of that throughout the different components of the application. You know, I can also comment on, it's not represented here, but in terms of industries and job functions represented, we have about 23% of the classes coming from a consulting industry, about 18% coming from finance, 14% from tech, 11% from government and education, and then lots of smaller percentages beyond that. So all of this will be represented on our website as well, but here's a quick kind of snapshot to help. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Alexis Marcus, who leads our evaluation team at MIT Sloan, and she's going to talk a bit about the application process.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I know that it's early for some of you and late for others, so I appreciate everyone logging on to learn a little bit more about our MBA application. And so we're going to go into each component of the application and answer any questions that you might have. So here's just a general overview of our application. As you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, the components of the application are the resume, cover letter, org chart, recommendation letter, your academic transcripts, GMAT or GRE score, your video statement, and then we ask for 2 additional references. So we're going to go into each of those components in just a minute here. After you are considered for your application is reviewed, we do interviews by invitation only, and that will also be covered. So just so you know, the first deadline is coming up in just a couple weeks. It's creeping up on us. October 1, 2020 is the round 1 deadline for MBA and LGO. So next I want to talk about our evaluation process. So we have a holistic evaluation process, and we look at each and every application after the deadline. So it's not a rolling application and it's not a rolling review process. We have a 20+ person admissions committee that's made up of professionally trained staff and readers, and they, look at your application and review every component, when making a decision on whether or not you'll move on to the next round of the interview. We are really looking for 2 kind of buckets in what we call demonstrated success and leadership skills. So how we do this is we have this XY axis here, and we score your application. So what we're looking for really is evidence of certain competencies. So in terms of demonstrated success, we're looking at your work success. We are looking at your quantitative abilities. So what have you done with data in the past in your work experience? And we're looking for those in your scoring. And then for personal leadership attributes, we're looking for how well you work with teams. How do you advocate for yourself if your opinion or your thoughts on something are a little bit different than the popular opinion? How are you able to get that point across? So, there are a number of things that we're looking for in the application, and it's your job to put together an application that gives us those examples and evidence of each of those competencies. So the next thing that I want to talk about is the cover letter. So the cover letter has a specific prompt, and you'll be able to see that when you get into the application online. And we are looking for specific examples in that cover letter. So we really want you to sell yourself and tell us why you are a good fit for Sloan and why Sloan is a good fit for you. It is a two-way street here. We also are big, supporters of that past performance is a good indicator of future performance. So make sure that you're telling us what you've been up to, recent examples of how you succeeded, and don't focus on future goals. While it's important what you want to do in the future, it's not something that we're specifically looking for in the application. So certainly use that 300-word cover letter to tell us a little bit about how you've been great and why you're going to be a great addition to our Sloan class. So on the resume, I know that there's a lot of questions on kind of the formatting and what we're looking for. So we are looking for a 1-page resume that's in Times New Roman size 10 font. And we're asking you to redact your contact information. And I think this is the one question that we get a lot. Why are we redacting our contact information? How do we do it? Redacting it is just removing it all together. So you can, I know we've already gotten a couple questions on this. You can completely remove it, so use that space to tell us more about your experiences, or you can just block it out so that we don't see it. And the reason for this is that we hold a number of calibration meetings with our admissions committee team, and we want to make sure that everyone is looking at things the same, and we're not looking at any contact information when we're sharing it amongst the group. And so, the formatting information, again, is on the application instructions. So don't feel like you need to memorize this slide right here, but make sure that you are doing everything in reverse chronological order, and the main categories that we're looking for: education, work experience, and additional information. We also want to learn a little bit more about you in the resume. So tell us a little bit more about your personal interests, what you do outside of work. And then, when you are talking about your work experience, make sure you're telling us about those quantifiable accomplishments rather than just bullet points of day-to-day activities. So the video statement is definitely my favorite part of the application. I think this is a really exciting way to get to know candidates and learn a little bit more about each and every one of you. So the video statement, we're asking for a 60-second unedited video where you introduce yourself to your classmates. I do like to say that, even though the prompt says this, please be assured that it's just the admissions committee that's seeing the video statement, but we want to know how you would introduce yourself to your classmates. So tell us a little bit more about that. Tell us, why are you coming to MIT Sloan? What is exciting about it? Pretend like you're in the classroom next year, and what would you say to your classmates? A couple quick tips on this: keeping it simple, using your best judgment. So for instance, you definitely don't want to be editing your video. We want to avoid background noise and music. So if you're outside, a lot of people do them inside, but if you happen to go outside to do your video, just be cognizant of what's surrounding you. If there's a train going by, we're likely not going to be able to hear you. So just think about kind of what's going on and review your video before you submit it, and make sure that we can see and hear you correctly. And so I think that's it for a video statement. Next up on the list is recommendation letter. So we have one required recommendation letter, and we do ask that you only submit one. My biggest piece of advice with the recommendation letter is to pick your recommender who knows you well and can speak to your successes. How well are you doing at work? What are your professional achievements? You don't want to be asking the CEO who you've met one time if you don't work with them on a regular basis. We're not looking for the caliber of the person that's writing the letter of recommendation, but rather what they're saying about you. We do utilize the GMAC common letter of recommendation. So on the application, you're actually going to put in the contact information of your recommender, and then that's going to prompt our system to send them a link to fill out the letter of recommendation. They can do it in short answer form, or they can do it in letter form, whichever they prefer. But I would recommend getting the recommender's information into the application sooner rather than later, so that they have access to that link and they can submit the letter as soon as possible. So the letter of recommendation is due the same day as the deadline. So for round one, it's October 1. And so you want to make sure that you're asking your recommender early on and giving them ample time to get that all submitted. And just follow up with them, make sure that they received the link, make sure they're able to submit it. And if there's any problems at all, you can always reach out to our office. I think most importantly, do not write the letter for them either. So just make sure that that content is coming directly from them. So in addition to the letter of recommendation, we also ask for additional references. And so this is very similar to the recommender, but it's just contact information for 2 additional people who can speak to your achievements and your progression. These 2 folks should be, able to speak just like a recommender, but we're just not asking them for an additional letter. You can let your references know that you have included them in the application as an additional reference, and we may or may not contact them. I don't want you to worry either way if we decide to. It's only if we have a couple more questions or just need a little bit more information, but it doesn't mean a good thing or a bad thing either way. We will not call them out of the blue. So we will always set up a time via email with your references to have a convenient time to chat. If they don't speak English, we will coordinate to have a translator as well. So the organizational chart is an interesting and fun part of our application. And this is where we want to kind of see your progression and your role within your organization. So we're hoping for you to give us a visualization similar to kind of what's included on your resume, but a visualization of the overarching organization that you work in and who you work directly with on a day-to-day basis. We understand and recognize that this isn't possible for every single person's specific job. So for a consultant, for example, you might want to include an organizational chart that is representative of a current project that you've worked on rather than, you know, the consulting firm overall. And that will allow us to see kind of who you're working with, how you know, you interact with people that are above you as well as any direct reports below you. It's important to note that the organizational chart is not intended for us to count up, you know, direct reports that you may or may not have. That's not at all what we want to see, but rather kind of just to see your progression. One of the other things that you can include in your organizational chart is any past roles that you have held within the organization and indicate, you know, what month and years you were in those roles and kind of where you progressed to. That's helpful as well. You can always redact confidential information or names from the organizational chart, so you do not need to feel like you need to include people's personal information there. You do want to make sure that everything in the org chart also matches up with what's on your resume and in the employment section of the application. So just make sure there's no discrepancies there so that we don't have any questions as we're reviewing the application. I'm going to hand it over to Jen, who is going to talk about test scores.
All right, thanks. So we do have a little bit of an update with regard to our standardized testing policies. We have made the decision recently to allow for students who are not able to take the test to apply without a test this year. So standardized tests such as GMAT, GRE, executive assessment, and for certain programs, TOEFL and IELTS are an important part of the application process and play a role in the holistic evaluation of candidates. However, in view of the challenges brought about by the recent pandemic, we will allow for students this year only to submit an application without the test and to review, we will review their applications without negative inferences. And then should we make the decision to admit you, you will not need to take a test. So again, this is for this year only. We do understand there are a lot of challenges brought about by, you know, gaining access to certain test centers and specific locations, as well as people who maybe have compromised immune systems and wanting to take the test in person versus online. We are sympathetic to everybody's unique situations and also aware of potential future challenges that could come up throughout this admission cycle. Therefore, we are trying to make kind of a standardized decision across the board for this year only. So, you know, in addition to submitting to a test, you know, we're interested in any pieces of evidence that would help to demonstrate, you know, your academic ability or your quantitative skills. So we've made a couple of changes to our application to allow for you to submit additional relevant information or additional relevant academic information. You know, that includes things like non-degree courses that you may have taken. Potentially you may have an expired test, a GMAT, a GRE, possibly an executive assessment. Anything that you have, you're welcome to submit to us. You know, any non-degree coursework that you've done, for instance, we often see on people's resumes or throughout the application process that individuals have taken courses, edX courses or Coursera courses on, you know, specific things that, you know, have helped them to gain the tools or skills that they need to succeed at work. And, you know, sometimes we see people who have taken MicroMasters or have done the MBA math prep. All of these would be great examples to help demonstrate your quantitative abilities. And then of course, we're interested in any additional professional certifications you may have earned or may be earning along the way. So the next slide here gives you a little bit of an update. So in addition to obviously uploading transcripts and detailing for us any degrees that you've received, we've made some additional optional fields in the application for you to add you know, information about relevant coursework that you've taken. So there's about 5 different categories that we've listed out, from microeconomics to calculus to any computer programming courses you've taken, statistics, probability, curiosity. So any type of courses like this, we'll just ask you to highlight for us. And then there's a section for you to upload any additional information that would be regarding non-degree courses that you've taken. Again, this all helps us to gain a sense of intellectual curiosity, you know, as well as comfort with quantitative work. So in lieu of a test, if you're not able to take a test this year, that's okay. You know, we will kind of dive much deeper into any additional academic evidence that you have in the application. And there's lots of fields detailed in the application for you to detail that out for us. So let's see, I can see there's lots of questions coming in. We will get to questions towards the end. We're going to take lots of live questions, and I have a couple of my colleagues on as well who will help you know, respond to questions individually as well. So we just have a few more slides to get to, and then we'll get to the Q&A. So I also wanted to touch on preparing for the interview. So, you know, once you submit an application, as Alexis commented, every application is reviewed by our admissions committee. That initial review process determines who gets invited to an interview. So an interview is an advanced step in the evaluation process. Not everyone is invited to interview, but if you are, it's you know, a sign that you're advancing in the process. So interviews are going to be all conducted virtually this year. So they will be a live video, probably conducted over Zoom or Skype. We're still working out specific details for the logistics, but you know, overall, it's about a 30-minute interview with a member of the professionally trained admissions committee. Again, there's, you know, 15 to 20 of us who conduct all of the interviews. It's a behavioral based interview, asking questions that are kind of evidence based. So asking you questions like, tell me about a time you had a difficult interaction with someone. And then based on your response, I may ask you, well, what did you do about that? How did you feel about that? What are the decisions that you made based on how that person responded? And then there's also a component of clarifying questions. So depending on, you know, what your background is, or questions that maybe I have after, you know, initially reading your application prior to the interview, I may have questions to clarify your work experience or something that you talked about in the application. And then also towards the end of the interview, everyone should be prepared, you know, to answer the question, why are you applying for an MBA and why at MIT Sloan? Why is the MIT Sloan MBA the best match for you? And so by attending events like this, as well as many of the other events we offer for you to get to know current students and alumni and also faculty members, it gives you a chance to get to know a bit more about our community and, you know, why the MIT Sloan experience is uniquely positioned to help you achieve your goal. And then, of course, we'll leave plenty of time at the end of the interview to ask any questions that you might have. And also just wanted to comment prior to the interview, so we've had this for a while now, but prior to the interview, if invited, you'll be asked to respond to a short answer question. That may be modified a little bit this year, but there is a short answer response question that you'll be asked to respond to, you know, between the time you get an interview invite and prior to the interview itself. So now I'm going to just turn it over one more time to Alexis to review some additional overall application tips.
Thanks. So the first thing I want to mention is applying early. So as I mentioned, round one is coming up on October 1st. So if you're ready to submit your application, I absolutely encourage you to do so, but definitely balance applying early and being ready and having your application ready. So you don't want to rush things. The benefit of applying early is that if you are waitlisted, we will re-review you for each round and you'll get a decision each round. You only can apply one time per cycle. So again, that's the balance that you need to make with whether your application is ready for round one or if it's best for you to wait for a future round. We are looking for reasons to admit you. So again, as I mentioned when we went through all of the components, make sure you're giving us evidence and examples that support, you know, the demonstrated success and that personal attributes that we're looking for, so that we can, you know, support a interview invite and then potentially down the road an invitation to join our class. We want you to be yourself. So don't feel like you need to put on some sort of persona or put something, you know, forward in the application. We aren't looking for something specific there. We really want to find out who you are and why you would be a great fit for Sloan. Make sure you follow the directions. So I think this is really important. We've laid out all of the instructions, both on the application, in our how to apply page online, and our FAQs. So go through and read those and, you know, make sure that you're following them. I think a great example is a letter of recommendation. We're asking for 1 letter of recommendation and 2 references. So make sure that that's what you're supplying us with. and just advocate for yourself. Show us how you are a great advocate and how you'll be a great advocate in the incoming MBA class. So I think that's kind of all of the tips, but we definitely want to open it up for questions now.
Right, so I'd like to invite my colleague Ann Connors to join us. Hi, Ann. She's going to help filter through some of the Q&A. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. She'll ask questions. We'll do our best to respond.
Yep, great. So 2 questions regarding the resume. Can you confirm, is it 1 page only? And if we have to remove our name and contact information, does that give us more space to put more space in our resume?
Yeah, so the resume is just 1 page, that's standard kind of protocol for post MBA employment searches. So we're trying to help you prepare for that a little in advance. So you can do it. We really need to see more evidence of the accomplishments that you've had versus the details of your job description. And then I think we said about 50 lines, but yeah, 1 page, you can gain maybe a little bit of space by eliminating the block up above with your contact information. But it should be legible. Try not to make it too dense or the font too small. I think we gave some instructions around font size and font type.
Great. For letters of recommendation, if I pick a recommender who's not from my current job because I don't want them to know I'm applying, do I need to explain that reason somewhere?
So you might want to explain it, but we completely understand this is a challenging situation for many people, and we do not expect you to compromise your employment just to apply to the MBA program. So it's completely understandable, but if you want to, you could comment on it in the short text box section within the employment section. That might be a good place to note it.
Great. Can you explain if there is a difference between the rounds, specifically round 1 and round 2?
Alexis, you want to take this one?
Sure, absolutely. So I think, exactly what I said earlier, applying earlier is just better in the sense that, there's more seats available in our MBA class. But again, you don't want to compromise the, submitting your application too early. Hopefully the test changes that Jen discussed will kind of open things up for you if that was a hurdle that you were having. But again, you want to make sure everything is kind of a good balance between submitting a good application and then round 2. I mean, the difference with round 2 is that it's just later on in the cycle. So we've already offered seats to a number of candidates.
Great. In terms of application materials and everything being submitted, if I want to apply in round 1, but my recommender doesn't apply or doesn't submit until round 2, what happens? Am I considered for round 2, or do you evaluate the application as is?
So we are looking to see a complete application at the application deadline. So if you're submitting for round 1, and submitting all of your information, paying your deposit, that's an indication to us that you want to be a round 1 candidate. We do give candidates, we do respond to everybody who's submitted an application who's missing information. So we let you know if you're missing something. We may give you a day or 2 of a grace period to get that letter in. But really, if you submit for round 1 without a recommendation letter, then you'd likely be considered as is.
Great. In regards to additional certifications, maybe you've taken MBA math or you have a CFA, where should we include this information? Should we upload it in the transcript section? Where can we showcase that we have these certificates?
Yeah, go ahead, Alexis. Yeah.
So that's all in the application. You'll see that there's some academic information. You'll put in the courses that you've taken or the certificates, and then there's also an upload. I believe it's under the same as the transcripts at the bottom. There's a new upload feature. So perhaps you were logged in yesterday and you didn't see that. You will definitely see it when you get off of this webinar. And if you have questions, you can always email us.
Great. Do you have any tips for reapplicants, and who is considered a reapplicant?
Yep. So anybody who's applied in the past is really considered a reapplicant, but we are looking to see what's changed from the time that you applied before until now. So, obviously if you had applied in round 3 or the extended round 3, there maybe has not been that much time, but, do your best to help detail for us, what's changed, and why MIT Sloan is, something that you're really passionate about. So, we're also really interested in finding people who want us, and finding people whose, career aspirations match the type of MBA experience that we can deliver. So, trying to kind of fine tune that in your cover letter, in your video, and then of course in the interview is important as well. But, rest assured, we see many reapplicants. Reapplicants are typically quite successful in the process, and, we will review all of your information.
Great. So we do have a bunch of questions regarding our process of deferrals this year and the potential, if any, impact of next year's application acceptance rate.
Yeah. So we do have some deferrals from this past year. There was a lot of uncertainty in the spring and in the summer months, and we were very sympathetic to people's situations. And so we did offer more deferrals this year than we have in the past. We don't know yet exactly how that will impact enrollment for this coming year. Just because someone has a deferral doesn't mean they're definitely going to act on that. And then we've had a number of people who we offer deferrals, ask for an additional year, and we've tried to be flexible with that as well. So, when we look at the enrollment numbers, there is going to be, a little bit fewer seats available because we did offer all of those deferrals, but I don't see it being a significant change in acceptance rates for the regular application pool.
Great. Just switching a bit to interview process. Is there a general timeline between interview invitations and when you have to schedule your interview?
Mm-hmm. So this year, we're unfortunately not able to travel, so sad for everybody, but it helps to accelerate the pace a little bit for interviews. So, typically about a month after the application deadline, we send out interview invitations, and then following that, we have about 4 to 5 weeks of interviews, and then we release decisions. So for round 1, we hope to send out interview invitations by the end of October, and then we will be starting interviews immediately after those invites go out. So again, you'll get access to a scheduler, and there's lots of flexibility there. If there's a slot that doesn't meet your specific needs, you can certainly email us. We'll also be offering interviews at all different hours of the day to accommodate people in many different time zones. So we're going to be, as flexible as possible. So to answer that specific question, typically you have a few days from when you get invited to interview until, when the first possible time you could interview is. But I anticipate this year giving applicants a lot more flexibility with that. In the past, we were only, for instance, if we were traveling to Tokyo, we would only be there for 1 or 2 days, so you didn't have a ton of flexibility around scheduling an in-person interview. But this year, that will be a lot more flexible.
Great. We have some questions, just one more clarification on the GMAT GRE score. If they have it, can they submit it after the round 1 deadline if they're planning to take it after? Will we consider it? How does that kind of work in evaluating the application?
Yeah, so if you have a test, we want to see it. It is a component of the application that demonstrates to us, like I said, your academic ability and your comfort level with quantitative work. If you're planning to take the test after the round 1 deadline, I'd say if it's of course you can submit an update to us with a test score after you submit your application, but we cannot guarantee that we'll go back to reevaluate your application once that test score, once that update comes in. So, there's maybe a short window of time, maybe a week or 2 after the deadline, where it would be ideal if you're going to take the test. It would be within a week or 2 of the deadline, trying to increase your chances of having that considered throughout the evaluation process. But much beyond that, it might not have a huge impact. except of course, if you're invited to interview, if you then are in the interview and have an updated test score to share with your interviewer, that would be, important information we'd like to see. So overall, we're going to be as flexible as we can, but we still have a process and a timeline that we need to maintain. So we'll look to dig a bit deeper into the other components of your application should you apply without a test. But please, everyone, I know there's questions that have come in about, do we accept the online version of the exam? Of course we do. Yes, we accept all versions of the exams, even expired test scores. This is really, being done in an effort to be sympathetic to those who do not have access to take a test right now. And then also to, be sympathetic to those who potentially, like I said, have compromised immune systems or compromised health issues where they don't feel comfortable going and sitting inside a test center to take the exam. So we're going to be as flexible as we can, but within reason. So, again, if you submit that updated test score 4 weeks after the deadline or the day before interview invites go out, we're not going to have time to go back and reevaluate everything.
Great, excellent. Can you talk about, I'm just going through some more questions. There are a lot, so bear with me. Talk a little bit more, Alexis. You said the video is your favorite component. Is there anything particular that stands out to you, or what advice can you give on the video?
Yeah, absolutely. I think kind of going back to what I said about being yourself in the application holds true for the video as well. So telling us a little bit more about why you chose to do your video where you did it. I've seen videos in kitchens, I've seen videos on the top of mountains. There have been a lot of really interesting and exciting videos. If that's not you being on top of a mountain or trying to cook, then please don't do that. But just kind of letting us get to know you a little bit more. And so I think it's important because I think how you would introduce yourself to the admissions committee might be a little bit different than you introduce yourself to your future classmates. And so we really are curious how you're going to introduce yourself to your future classmates. And you're likely going to tell them a story about, your past and kind of what your experiences are in a different way than you would say that to the admissions committee. So I think it might be a little bit more casual, a little bit more genuine perhaps. So thinking about that, but don't do anything crazy if that's not you. I think the uniqueness is something that people might take and run with, but we really want to get to know you better and see what you would have to say. I hope that's helpful.
Great. We have a question about international GPAs, or if some universities don't provide a GPA, do we convert to the US 4.0 scale, or what's the process for that?
Yep, absolutely. You don't need to convert it for us. We can, we're very, very familiar with international GPAs, so we can absolutely look at that and convert it on our end.
So we have a couple questions from people here who are interested in the MBA early program. From right now, are all these criteria for the application same for those who are interested in applying in MBA early?
So the MBA early is our deferred admission offering available to college seniors or people who have gone into a master's program without full-time work experience. The application details for the MBA early process are slightly different. We don't ask for an organizational chart. We do ask for 2 letters of recommendation, with one of those letters ideally coming from an academic source. The standardized test decision applies to all graduate programs at Sloan this year. So that's the same. The MBA early application will be going live soon, within the next week or so. But the deadline for candidates to apply through the MBA early process isn't until April of next spring. So for MIT college seniors, there's an earlier deadline only for MIT students, which is in late November. But beyond that, you have plenty of time to prepare. We have lots of programming and webinars specific to the MBA early process, so I'd encourage you to join those, and also lots of individual outreach we're doing to regional pockets of universities throughout the world as well.
Great. We have some more questions on the org chart, and I understand that the org chart for everyone is going to be different. There's no one standard organizational chart, but if you have a startup or a family business, how would you kind of plan that org chart? And second part, If you have your own business or family business, what should you do about the recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the organizational chart, if you're a solo entrepreneur or you work for a family business, we still want to know who you're working with. So if it's not necessarily like the internal structure of the company, if it's just you, tell us kind of in an org chart who you work with outside. So who are your clients, who are your customers, who are you interacting with, so that we can get a better sense there. And then along those same lines, if it's a family company, if it's your father that you report up to, or your uncle, or your aunt, whoever it might be, tell us that in the line of the organization. And then in terms of the letter of recommendation, I would recommend getting a letter of recommendation, not from a family member, but certainly from a client or a customer or someone who you interact with in the professional setting.
Great, excellent. We have a lot of people here who are interested in LGO. Could you just maybe high overview, are the application components generally the same, or is there additional content needed for the LGO application if you apply through Sloan?
Yep, so the LGO program is our joint degree program with the School of Engineering, where in a few more months, 24 months, you're able to earn a Master's of Engineering and an MBA. It's a Leaders for Global Operation program, or LGO. The application process is essentially the same. So if you apply to LGO through the Sloan School, you fill out the MBA application in addition to submitting a statement of purpose and an additional letter of recommendation that has some questions that are targeted towards someone who can speak to your technical abilities. So it's kind of two additional components. You also have the option to apply through the engineering school for LGO. So for instance, if you're interested in applying for a Master's of Mechanical Engineering, you can apply through Mechanical Engineering and fill out their graduate school application. And again, there's two additional components to that application that are relevant to the LGO questions. Essentially, it's the same process. You follow similar timelines for round one. The round one deadline for LGO is the same as MBA round one, October 1st. Applications are reviewed, interviews are conducted around the same time, and then decisions released according to the same schedule. LGO round two is slightly accelerated. So the LGO round two deadline is actually December 1st, I think. Applications are reviewed throughout December. Interviews would be conducted in January, and then decisions would be released in early March. And the reason for the difference in timelines is just alignment with the engineering departments in the early part of the year in January and February. So it's essentially the same process. There's, again, lots of specific events detailing the LGO process. I encourage you to, join some of those events as well, or certainly you can email us if you have any unique questions to LGO.
Great. Alexis, you mentioned contacting the references and giving them heads up and not cold calling them. Can you give a range of dates potentially when we might reach out, just so that the applicants can let them know that Sloan might be contacting them?
So I would say it's when we're kind of reviewing your application. So I would give them the heads up that you're providing their contact information as an additional reference, and that if they have questions on your application, we will likely, so for round one, for instance, we'll be reviewing applications mostly in October. So if we have additional questions, we may be contacting them during the month of October. But keep in mind that we could also contact a reference perhaps after an interview. So that might go all the way through the beginning of December. So, the references are really there should we have those additional questions at any point during the admission cycle. And so just letting them know that we will absolutely send an email to find a convenient time. We will not be calling them out of the blue and anticipate that they have, 10 or 15 minutes to talk to us. We will find a time that works for them.
Great. Following up a little bit on that, if I choose a recommender from my previous employer, do I need to make an org chart for that firm as well as my current position and current firm?
That's a great question, but no, I don't think so. Jen, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. You don't have to. I mean, if your reference happens to appear on your org chart, then you could note them somehow or put them in a different color just to highlight for us, but we do not need an org chart from a previous employer or previous role if it doesn't relate to what you're doing now. That's fine.
Great. During COVID, we've seen a lot of job changes, potential layoffs, or changes in positions on short notice. How do we tackle the org chart? Do we provide the most recent firm that we've been in, or if it's just a new position in the last couple months, do we provide the previous position that we might have been in for longer?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you've experienced sort of an unexpected change of plans over the past 6 to 9 months, you could upload 2 org charts if it makes sense, or if we're very interested in seeing the organizational chart for what you're currently doing, wherever you're currently employed, what your current work is. But if you've only been doing that for a very short period of time, then it would maybe make sense, to upload an additional page. So you could actually upload up to 2 pages for the org chart, to detail for us kind of what your previous role was. We know things have been unpredictable over the past few months, and again, we're trying to be as sympathetic as we can be to all of the different unique circumstances applicants are facing right now. So if it makes sense, use your best judgment, upload a second org chart.
Great. If I want to apply with a significant other or maybe a family member, how does the admissions committee review those applications?
Yeah, independently. So there is a question in the application: are you applying with a significant other or someone else from the same household? Sometimes, it's good for us to know in case we happen to be interviewing you back to back, and to help connect the dots. But really, we do not use that information to influence the evaluation process.
If we're interested in applying to more than one program at Sloan, can we use the same application?
No, unfortunately not. So each program requires a unique application. So you would need to submit an application to whichever program you're applying to, with the exception of the joint degree with LGO. So if you happen to apply for the LGO program through the Sloan School and you're not admitted to the joint degree of LGO, then you would automatically be considered for just the MBA in the following round. That's kind of the only, but by nature, you're applying to a joint degree program, so that's 2 degrees. But if you were interested in applying possibly for the Master of Finance program and the MBA, you would need to submit different applications.
Great. We still have a lot of questions about the recommender and references. Maybe if someone has an NGO or they're extremely involved in volunteering, how does the committee view those individuals who are maybe recommenders or references opposed to the professional work setting?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you're the best sort of, judge of what you want us to know. But the most important thing I'd say is to read the 4 or 5 specific prompts that we ask recommenders to speak to, and then to find an individual who can give us sort of detailed, specific examples of how you've been able to succeed, or examples of how you've been able to demonstrate evidence of those specific questions. So we are interested in, how you've performed professionally. And, the more experience you have, probably the more important it is for you to demonstrate that in your recommendation letters. But if you've only been working for 2 years and you're afraid to let your employer know that you're applying to business school, again, we'll try to be understanding of that situation, and it would not have a negative impact on you. But possibly you could confide in 1 or 2 people that you work with and list them as references should we have additional questions.
Great. Does Sloan use the common letter of recommendations for the recommender? And can you provide, I know you already touched upon it, but maybe an example of what you potentially might ask a reference?
I would say the references will be the same exact questions as are listed for the GMAC letter of recommendation, common form of recommendations. And we do utilize that form. Again, Jen just mentioned the list of questions. They are listed out right in the instructions on the letter of recommendation page. And those are the same types of questions that we would be asking additional references. So you can think of references the same exact way as you think of a letter, or whoever you're asking to write that letter of recommendation. We're just not asking them to submit an additional letter at this time.
Great. Is there a space in the application to describe any unusual circumstances, or what we used to call potential red flags?
Yeah, so there's a couple short answer hidden blocks of text. So there's one that's relevant if there's any extenuating circumstances as it relates to your academic background. There's a short answer text box that you could address it there. And then if there's anything sort of extenuating or why you've decided to leave an employer or something like that, there's a couple short answer text boxes within the employment section of the application. And then, if you can't find the right place, you could address it in your cover letter or your video.
Great, excellent. So the org chart I've always known is definitely hard for people because everyone's structure is different. If you work at a large company that has over 200,000 people in it, how far up the chain of supervisors, CEOs do you want them to highlight?
I would say certainly if you have, interaction with the C-suite, make sure that you make that detailed on the org chart, but you definitely do not need to detail the 200,000. So maybe it's your department overall that you interact with, and then some lines up to the C-suite if you have interactions with them. If you don't feel like you need to go up that high, and we can just see that department or unit that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Great, excellent. Is there any provisions with COVID for an application fee waiver?
So a number of the events that we are offering will provide, if you attend specific events, they may offer you a fee waiver. So you could look into that. And then we have identified there's a form you would complete within the application if you fall into any of the specific categories that we would offer a fee waiver to, and then you could qualify for a waiver for that. So, the answer is yes. There's some detailed, definitions of who applies or who would qualify, for a fee waiver. So you could look into that. It's all detailed in the applications instructions page.
Great. We have another question on the GPA. The application, you must enter some numerical number in that field. What should they do if it was a pass-fail or if your institution did not have a GPA?
I think so why don't you enter a 0 in? Put a 0 in if you do not have a numeric GPA. I know that some of the schools in the UK have that. So put a 0 in, that's fine. And then just make a note in the, additional information about your academic experience that, why you put the 0 there.
Great. For the cover letter, should it be more standard and professional, or can they get creative?
I mean, we like some degree of sort of creativity, but at the same time, it's an application to a professional master's degree. So, I think, we do give some guidelines for standard formatting for the cover letter in terms of what you write about there. You can certainly have a degree of creativity with that, but, we are asking that you try to kind of adhere to the directions that we included.
So I think we're wrapping up on questions. I'm going to go through a couple more. Let's see. What happens if, you can't get the formal transcripts, with a lot of universities being closed due to COVID, how do we handle needing formal hard copy transcripts?
Yep, so we have a bunch of time before you need to submit a formal transcript. Right now, we just need you to submit a self-reported online transcript. So something, if you can log into your school's, registrar system and submit a PDF of what your transcript was, that's fine. So an unofficial electronic version. If admitted, we do a verification of a number of different components of your application, and we will need an official transcript at that point. But that would be, later into the spring. So, should there still be challenges with regard to getting official transcripts at that time, we'll come up with a solution to that answer. But it is typically something that we ask for. And even given this past summer, throughout all of the challenges with schools being closed, the process has worked relatively smoothly and most people have been able to get an official transcript.
Great. We stress on the application that we want to focus on current or past success as it's an indicator of future success. Many people are asking that Their future goals are a huge reason of why they want Sloan specifically and why they're applying. Where can they showcase this? How can they tie in their story of why they're applying and why they want Sloan?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So you can do it in either the video or the cover letter or both. I mean, we're not, we don't want you to feel undue pressure to tell us exactly what you want to do after the MBA, because we want you to be able to come and join our MBA experience, learn about what you never knew existed, and we expect to give you the tools and the ability to try something new. But that being said, of course, this is a huge investment of time and money, and we want you to be able to express why MIT Sloan and what your future goals are and how it all fits together. Should you have that well thought out. So if it's something you want to share, I think the cover letter and or the video is the best place to do that, as well as talking about it in the interview. But if you're not sure, or, you know, of course we would never hold you to what you say, but if you're not sure, you're continuing to explore, that's perfectly fine too. And you do not need to feel the pressure to address it in the application.
Great. How far back should we document our work experience in the widget or on the resume? Do we go back from 3 previous jobs or put internships? How far should we manage the work experience?
Yeah, so the application allows you to upload detailed information from your previous 3 positions. And then beyond that, you would detail everything on the resume. I'd say, you know, we're interested in internships that you might have had during college, especially if they're professional internships, as well as any post undergraduate professional experience that you've had.
Great. I think we're wrapping up. I know we're very close to the end of the time. So Alexis or Jen, any last minute comments before we finish?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly as we've continued to reiterate throughout this entire hour, you know, we're really looking forward to getting to know you all better throughout the application process. We're sympathetic to the situation that everyone is in right now, and we understand there's lots of unplanned situations you may find yourself in. We're looking forward to getting to know you better through the video, through your reference letters, through the cover letter, and then of course through the interview process. And you know, myself, Alexis, and Trish behind the scenes, as well as everyone else on our admissions committee, you know, we're really excited for this season. We're excited to have those applications start rolling in over the next few weeks and learn about all of the amazing things that you've been doing. And, you know, think of us, I know Alexis already said this, but please think of us as your advocate. Your application is giving us the tools that we need to advocate for you and to admit you throughout the process. So thanks so much for joining us today. We hope that you'll continue to join us for more events in the future. And should you have any questions, you can contact us here, you know, send us an email and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So thank you so much.
Thank you.